History is a fascinating kaleidoscope of events, but today we're pulling back the curtain on an overlooked chapter: the Dutch settlers in America. Our well-worn textbooks paint a familiar picture of the first European settlers in America: the English, the Spanish, the French. Yet there's a significant part of history that has been brushed under the rug, an untold story of the Dutch settlers who made their mark on this continent long before these commonly recognized pioneers. The Dutch story begins not in the 17th century, as many believe, but much earlier, in the early 14th and 15th centuries. They were among the first Europeans to set foot in North America, challenging the narrative that the English and British were the first permanent settlers. But the story doesn't end there. The Dutch were not just explorers of North America, they were also pioneers in South America. Contrary to popular belief, they didn't arrive there in the 17th century. Their journey to these lands predates that by centuries, reaching as far back as the 12th or 13th century. In the vast expanse of the Americas, the Dutch didn't just settle, they thrived. They lived among the Mohawk people, indigenous to the lands that are now Canada and America. Evidence points to their cohabitation in Canada as early as the 14th and 15th centuries, and later down in America around the 16th century. This tale of the Dutch settlers is not just an account of exploration and settlement. It's a story of resilience, coexistence, and often overlooked contributions to the tapestry of American history. So, why has this chapter been overlooked? Why does it remain unrevealed? These are questions we dare to ask as we delve into this fascinating part of history. Our goal is not just to tell a story, but to shed light on an overlooked part of history and challenge the common misconceptions. Get ready to embark on a journey that will challenge what you thought you knew about America's early settlers. Our story begins not in the 1600s, as many would believe, but in the early 14 and 1500s, with the arrival of the Dutch in North America. Think of the Dutch not as latecomers to the New World, but as pioneers, these intrepid explorers, traders, and settlers from the small but mighty country of the Netherlands were among the first Europeans to make permanent settlements in the Americas, long before the English and the British made their mark. Contrary to popular belief, the Dutch didn't first set foot in the Americas in the 17th century. Instead, they arrived far earlier, in the late Middle Ages, around the 14 and 1500s. Their initial voyages were driven by a desire for new trade routes and the promise of unknown riches. These journeys brought them to the vast and diverse continents of North and South America, where they began to establish a presence. Now, let's debunk another myth. The Dutch didn't arrive in South America in the 1600s, as is commonly taught. Historical records suggest their presence there was significantly earlier, possibly as far back as the 13th or 12th century. Here, they forged new paths, shaping the course of history in ways that often go unrecognized. In North America, the Dutch were not just transient visitors. They were settlers, establishing permanent homes and communities. They didn't merely lay claim to the land. They lived on it, worked it, and became part of its story. The Dutch were not isolated settlers either. They lived amongst indigenous peoples, such as the Mohawk, in both Canada and America, fostering relationships and exchange. While the narrative of the New World is often dominated by tales of English and British settlers, the Dutch, too, played a significant role in the early settlement of the Americas. Their story is one of resilience, adaptability, and a relentless quest for opportunity. It's a story that deserves recognition and respect, a story that is integral to understanding the complex tapestry of American history. And so, the Dutch began to weave their story into the fabric of the New World. As we've established, the Dutch were here before many others, yet their stories often get brushed under the rug. Why is that, you might wonder? Well, the reasons are multifaceted. The narrative of history, much like any story, is often shaped by those who wield the power of the pen. And for centuries, the British have largely controlled the narrative of European settlement in the Americas. As such, the contributions of the Dutch, while significant, have been overshadowed. In the early 14th and 15th centuries, Dutch explorers and settlers were venturing into uncharted territories, making their way to North America and even South America long before it became fashionable among other European powers. However, their emphasis was more on trade and less on territorial conquest, which may be another reason why their contributions have been overlooked. They were not empire builders in the traditional sense, but their influence was no less significant. In the Americas, the Dutch established thriving trade networks, integrating themselves into indigenous societies, such as the Mohawk in Canada and later in America. This approach differed significantly from the more confrontational stance adopted by other European powers, and perhaps it is this peaceful cohabitation that has led to their contributions being downplayed. Moreover, the Dutch settlements, while permanent, were not as large or as grand as those of the Spanish or English, and thus they did not leave behind the same physical legacy. But the absence of grand monuments does not mean the absence of influence. The Dutch were pioneers, their influence seeping into the fabric of the societies they touched, much like water seeping into the ground. Their story is one of quiet influence, of trade and integration, of peaceful cohabitation with indigenous societies. It's a story that doesn't fit neatly into the narrative of conquest and empire, but it's a story that deserves to be told. But history, much like water, finds a way to seep through the cracks. The Dutch didn't just settle in America. They integrated with the local tribes, particularly the Mohawk people. Their story is one of cohabitation and mutual respect, a narrative that began in the early 14th and 15th centuries. The Dutch were not strangers to foreign lands and cultures. Their extensive travels and trades had given them a cosmopolitan perspective, and this openness was evident in their interactions with the Mohawk people. They didn't come with the intention of conquest or domination. Instead, they approached the Mohawks as equals, fostering a relationship based on mutual respect and understanding. In the early days, the Dutch and the Mohawks lived side by side in Canada. This was a time of cooperation and shared experiences. The Dutch learned from the Mohawks, adopting their survival techniques, understanding their customs, and even learning their language. The Mohawks, in turn, were introduced to European methods of agriculture, construction, and trade, which they integrated into their own way of life. As the centuries rolled on, the Dutch and the Mohawks moved together into what is now the United States around the 1600s. This migration wasn't a forceful invasion, but a natural progression of their shared journey. The Dutch settlements in America were not isolated European enclaves. They were integrated communities where Dutch and Mohawk cultures intermingled and coexisted. This harmonious coexistence was no accident. It was the result of the Dutch settlers' adaptability, their willingness to learn from and respect the Mohawk culture. They didn't try to erase or replace the Mohawk way of life. They adapted to it, and in doing so, they enriched their own culture. This harmonious coexistence is a testament to the Dutch settlers' adaptability and respect for local cultures. Their story with the Mohawk people is not just a tale of survival in a new land, but a lesson in cultural exchange and mutual respect. A lesson that, even today, holds relevance and resonance. As we've seen, the Dutch settlers were pioneers in their own right. But what legacy did they leave behind? The Dutch left an imprint on America that is as deep as it is wide. From architecture to societal structures, their influence can be seen in many aspects of American life. Let's start with architecture. Dutch colonial-style houses, characterized by their steep, sloping roofs and chimney at one or both ends, are a common sight in the northeastern United States. These structures are a testament to the Dutch settlers' building prowess and their adaptation to the harsh winter climates. Moving on to societal structures, the Dutch introduced the concept of tolerance and coexistence to the New World. They lived in harmony with the Mohawk people, learning from them and trading with them. This early example of cultural exchange and mutual respect set a precedent for future generations and is an integral part of America's multicultural identity. Now, let's talk about culture. If you've ever enjoyed a donut, you can thank the Dutch. They brought this sweet treat to America, along with other culinary delights like coleslaw and waffles. And let's not forget about Santa Claus. The beloved Christmas figure has his roots in the Dutch character of Sinterklaas. In terms of governance, the Dutch concept of communal decision-making is reflected in the town meetings that still take place in New England. The Dutch settlers believed in the power of community and the importance of every voice being heard. This spirit of democracy and equality is a fundamental part of American values. Moreover, the Dutch language has left its mark on American English. Words like boss, cookie, and coleslaw are borrowed from Dutch, and places like Brooklyn and Harlem carry Dutch names in honor of their early settlers. Their legacy, while often overlooked, is interwoven into the very fabric of American history. From simple donuts to profound societal constructs, the Dutch influence in America is undeniable and everlasting. Their story is a testament to the power of cultural exchange and mutual respect, reminding us of the richness that diversity brings. The history of the Dutch settlers in America is a tale of resilience, adaptability, and legacy. It's a narrative that dates back to the early 14th and 15th centuries, long before the British set foot on the American continent. The Dutch, with their indomitable spirit, were among the first Europeans to establish permanent settlements across the Americas. Their arrival was not a late 16th century event, as popularly believed, but a much earlier venture into the unknown. Their exploratory courage led them to the shores of North America and even further south, debunking the commonly held belief of their late arrival in the southern part of the continent. Beyond exploration, the Dutch settlers were also pioneers of coexistence. In the heart of North America, they lived alongside the Mohawk people, establishing a relationship that spanned centuries. This camaraderie began in the 14th and 15th centuries in Canada and continued into the 16th century when both the Dutch and the Mohawks moved further into the American continent. This shared history is a testament to the Dutch settlers' adaptability and respect for indigenous cultures. Yet, despite these significant contributions, the Dutch narrative often gets brushed under the rug, eclipsed by the more dominant English and British narratives. The Dutch, however, have left an indelible mark on the American landscape. From architecture to language, their influence is woven into the fabric of American society. Their legacy is a testament to the diverse origins of America, a country shaped by the contributions of many cultures. As we delve deeper into the annals of history, we uncover the layers of untold stories, each one adding depth and texture to our understanding of the past. The story of the Dutch settlers is one such narrative, a narrative that deserves to be told and remembered. The Dutch settlers, the often overlooked pioneers, have a story that is as rich and complex as the tapestry of America itself.